Good evening, everyone. Hi, I am Erin Cog. I'm the Director of Field Education here at U of M. It's so nice to see y'all. It is not required, but I will say it's not a huge group. So if you would like to turn your cameras on, you're more than welcome to. I am going to run some slides and some information and talk to you about what it's going to be like to apply for field for starting field in the spring summer term. But before I get into all the things that I'm sure you have lots of questions about, I wanted to pause and let my colleague introduce herself as well. Professor Dadsell.
Hello, everyone. Good to see you. My name is Christina Dadswell. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm the Assistant Director of our residential field education program here at University of Michigan School of Social Work. So happy you joined us today. We're looking forward to you starting field placement this coming May.
Thank you, thank you. So, Professor Dadsell, feel free to chime in. Please feel free anytime. Dr. Robinson is the Assistant Director for the online program. Many of you in the online program have already probably interacted with Dr. Robinson online or in different webinars as well. So let me just ground us for who this webinar is for. If you are watching this as a recording or you are here in this space, these are for those of you who are starting field in the spring summer term. So this would be May 2025. This would be your first term in field. And it should be those of you in our residential or on-campus program, and also those who we consider kind of local online students. And so when I say local, it's within about 45 to 60 minutes of Ann Arbor. It's not exact, so there might be a little bit of a extra space or diameter there. But for many of your colleagues who are further out, if you could imagine, in different states in particular, it takes us a much longer time to get that started. So your colleagues out of state and often in the UP, they've started this process actually a semester ago. So 2 semesters ahead of when they're starting. So those folks are already in process. And so we didn't want to make them sit through this because they're already started. But I hope that you are in the right space. And then the other kind of just really small housekeeping, and then I'll get started. I turned on captions, so feel free to turn that on your Zoom. If you need to, this is an inclusive space. So if you need to take a snack or you need to walk while you're listening to this, or you have pets, dependents, babies, all are welcome on this call, whoever you want to hear this conversation, but really everyone's kind of welcome in this space. So if you have any questions, I would say maybe let me get through the content because I might answer your question, but write down your question or send me a text, send me a chat, and we can try to answer that as well at the very end, okay? All right, let's get started. So today's agenda, what we're going to go over today is I'm going to introduce you to the entire field team. So I'll show you who our team is, and then we'll talk a little bit about what field education is, talk about the field application process. There are some additional considerations to remember and keep in mind, so we'll go over those. We'll talk about preparing for field. So once you land a field placement, what that looks like, and then a short stint on the school social work specialization and certification, because some people have some questions around that and how that intersects with field. And then, like I said, this full 90 minutes is not going to be me talking to you, I promise. There'll be definitely a lot of time at the end to answer your questions. So first, I wanted to introduce our team. So Professor Dadswell is thankfully here with us in person. And like I said, Dr. Robinson is the assistant director for the online program. The bottom row is our amazing teammates. So the first two folks, Celia and Kendra, are our program assistants. Oftentimes, if you're reaching out to our office, they are going to be the main people that you're going to interact with. So they're just really great, the front office folks, and they'll answer kind of the main emails. Sarah Castillo is our office manager. And so you may go to her for kind of administrative questions sometimes over time. I won't get in the weeds, but she can sometimes help us with some of those things on the computer side and just paperwork, those kind of things. And Talia is our field coordinator. So she helps out our online program with, again, some of those more difficult placements that we have at a state in particular. This is our amazing field faculty team, in addition to our 2 assistant directors who also serve as field faculty. These are some additional 10 folks who will be field faculty. So in the Office of Field Education, we are excited to share that field faculty really are very involved. It's very intentional how field faculty interact both with being assigned to agencies. They get to know the agencies, they get to know kind of the clientele in that space, but they also get to know you as students. And so the goal is really where we can to be consistent. Every once in a while, you have to shift. So I will manage expectations to say, if you can imagine, it's kind of an administrative puzzle a little bit for me, is I can't have one person have 150 students and one person only have 10, and we assign kind of by agency. So we do have to make sure that people's workloads are relatively the same, but for the most part, we try to keep you with the field faculty. But all of these field faculty are really here, have been really dedicated and trained to do this work together with you and partner with you and collaborate with you. So, we're just really excited to support you in your field placement process. All right, so let me share a little bit about the purpose of field education here. So, field education, I'm just going to do all these and talk through it a little bit. Sorry. So purpose of field education is really to provide a hands-on kind of real world training experience during your social work education. The goal here, though, is to integrate knowledge and theory and skills, all the things that you're learning in class, right? The point is that you're concurrently taking classes in field. It's really practicing that in a real world learning environment, similar to what you'll be experiencing as a social work practitioner once you graduate. Field is also a place where you'll learn and practice how to navigate ethical concerns that commonly arise in settings where social workers find themselves. What it is not, and I'm going to share kind of what field is and what field's not. What field is not intended to be is your first kind of career experience or pipeline into your first job. I cannot guarantee you that your field is going to result in a job. And I can also tell you that many people are in field and they think that's what they want, and they completely end up pivoting and shifting at the end of school, and that's totally okay. The cool thing about our degrees is that it's very versatile. And so our goal in the field office is to get you the field hours that map to your pathway per our accreditation kind of requirements, so that you can get your degree and then go do all the great things. So students are sometimes placed in settings that maybe aren't exactly what you thought, and that's okay. We'll work with you. But we want to make sure that you're getting those transferable skills and making sure that you're marketable, right? When you graduate and you start to look for work. Field education provides an opportunity to take your classroom learning and practice these concepts and skills in the community where social work really takes place. And it's really, I want to reiterate the importance, and again, I'm going to say a couple things several times. So whenever someone says things multiple times, it's really to try to highlight it. It's really important that we work together to try to preserve your field placement. What I have experienced in this last kind of year and a half being in this new role, I transitioned from being in healthcare for about 20 years before this, is that preserving your field placement, I think sometimes there's a propensity to just be a little bit nervous or anxious at the first kind of uncomfortable space that field presents. And that's super normal. And I will say that leaving your field placement early is going to disrupt a lot of things. It has financial implications. It may delay your graduation. And we don't want that. Typically students don't realize. And so I've been trying to say it up front, is that it really is important to we're going to try to match you and get you all the hours. And we're trying to support you through so that you can make it through the process. Securing a new field placement really takes several months often, and the further out you get, the longer it takes. So what will you do in field? You'll do a few things. Obviously, I mentioned kind of practicing and applying classroom theories and concepts in a real world setting, whether you're micro or macro. You will be practicing those ethical concerns and, of course, following our NESW Code of Ethics. You'll be practicing skills and behaviors that lead to our core competency development. So the CSWE social work competencies are highlighted there, or hyperlinked there. And we'll share the slides as well. It'll be available on the OFE website. But those 9 competencies are going to be the ones that we are kind of contracting with you over the semesters to see how is your skill development and kind of rigor increasing over each semester so that you can learn those competencies and say that you're proficient in those spaces. And then the final kind of bucket is practicing and ensuring adherence to our technical standards. So this is something that we bring up in the program in classes and in field. The 3 major themes are communication, intellectual and cognitive skills, and then that emotional and behavioral readiness. I think of it a lot as professionalism skills in this space. And so this will give you the opportunity to practice those technical standards and make sure that you're adhering to those as well. As far as your field team, so sometimes there's some confusion about the terminology that we use. So I just want to clarify. So obviously you are the first bucket, so you're the MSW student. The field faculty is the person like Professor Dadswell and the 10 people that I showed on that screen. This is the faculty member. If you think about field's a class, and so if you think about a class that has a professor on record, this is your field faculty. So when you think about faculty, it's just the faculty member that's on record who's going to give you a grade for field, right? And then if you look at your field instructor, this is typically the person that's at your field site who's instructing you and giving you support and doing that kind of field supervision every week, right? So that's the person that's at your site. And then every once in a while, there's an additional person involved. It could be a secondary field instructor. It also could be what we call a task supervisor. So we have some situations in which there's a qualified field instructor, but there's also someone involved. So let's just say from an interprofessional perspective, there's a licensed counselor, right? Or a marriage and family therapist who's also in your clinic, or a psychiatrist or a business administrator. There's different folks that really you could gain a lot of skill from and learn from, and they are there on site, but you have to have a qualified field instructor for it to count. And so you have to have both people involved. And so oftentimes there's some situations where you'll have both a field instructor and a task supervisor. As far as your commitment here, and I'm going to send out an email as well. You'll get this kind of graphic in email form as well. Whether you're in field for 2 consecutive semesters, 3 or 4, it really depends on your curriculum plan. So I would defer you to your course planning sheet. Hopefully that sounds familiar to folks. That really should be the way in which you're going to progress through our program. And so it depends on if you have advanced standing and kind of whether you're part-time or full-time. So I'm not going to go through all the curricular plans because that's too much. But what we did here is try to give you a conversion chart. So for those of you who are not advanced standing, you're going to have to do foundation field. That is social work 515. And so the conversion there is you're going to register for 2 credits. That's going to be, the number of hours listed there. And so we divided over those 14 weeks of field. And so that's roughly about 16.5 hours a week. There'll be some additional things that you can count as field hours. So let's say you do supervision field connections with your field faculty actually counts for field. So that's why we say it's roughly about 16.5. You have to make sure that you get those total hours in for foundation. And then if you are advanced standing, you already have a BSW or you're moving on into your next semester, that's what we call advanced field. But then the calculation changes. So I know it's a little confusing, but every credit of 691 then counts for 56 hours. So the multiplier is listed there. So most people will sign up for 4 hours or 6. I would say that's probably the common ones. And so if you think about how many days per week, and I'm going to talk about planning your schedule here in a little bit, but foundation field is about 16.5 hours. So that's 2 days. So when you do foundation field, I would plan on having about 2 days, Monday through Friday, available to do your field. And I'm telling you this now so that you can start to plan. You have a whole semester to try to figure out how you're going to fit in this field component into all the things that you're doing right now. And then when you go to advanced field, a lot of folks will go either if you're part-time 2 days a week, or if you're generally speaking full-time, you're doing 3 days a week. And that's so 2 days a week is 16 hours, 3 days a week is 24 hours. So it's even more hours that you have to get done in field. The total that you need to do for non-advanced standing is 900. And then for advanced standing folks, you're going to have to do 672. And that is a requirement from our accrediting body. So Council on Social Work Education determines how many hours every social work student has to do, at least the minimum. All right. And then most field placements, the vast majority are during normal business hours. So Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. So just make sure that you're planning accordingly for that. And I'll say a few more words about that in a little bit. All right. So I wanted to go through some common field questions that come up. And we're going to do it now because often people have these questions sooner than later. So write down your questions if I don't get a common question that you are anticipating. So is field a class? Yes, you will register for 515 or 691, depending on where you're at, if that makes sense. So look at your course planning sheet. It'll tell you which field to sign up for. If you're confused about that, I would say feel free to reach out to your academic advisor. You can reach out to the technical advisor emails, that's everywhere. And you also can reach out to, we have program managers respectively. So Antoine Featherstone is the online program manager. For those of you in the online program, I think you've gotten some messages from Antoine. And those of you in the on-campus or residential side, Kate Seckler, Sechler, is your program manager. And so they often, you can book a time to meet with them as well, and they can walk you through, they know where field goes in your curricular plan. They can help you walk through that registration wise. Can I complete my field placement at my place of employment? Yes, it's called an employment-based placement. And so I'm gonna give you some of the criteria later, but you absolutely can do that. There's a lot of requirements in that space. You'll have to do a separate application, but this sometimes is very convenient for folks who are already in a human services, social services space and can figure out how to make field part of their kind of work and or in addition to. So their job kind of lets them flex hours and they can count some of those hours or work some additional hours in a different part of their organization. So employment-based placements can be really helpful for some folks. Can I change field placements? So here's my answers. Field placements are really only changed in extenuating circumstances. Again, I would highly, highly discourage you from changing your field placements for lots of different reasons. It often delays, it will delay, I'll tell you this, it will delay your progress through. It's just how much delayed, how delayed it'll be, because what happens is you have to wrap up and kind of terminate with your first placement. And then we start the process all over again to replace you. And so what that means is it can delay when you start again, which delays your hours, which can delay graduation, kind of your graduation date. But it also has potential implications for tuition. So if you proceed into the next semester, you're going to have to pay for those credits into the next semester. And that can be quite costly for a lot of people. So just being kind of mindful of that. Do I have to find my own placement? No. We are here to help you and support you. I will say there's other social work programs that really do put a lot of the burden and onus on students. And it's not, I'm trying not to compare us too much, but I'll just say it's a point of pride on my end that our field office is really able to provide this level of support and collaborate with you to actually help you find these agencies. We have well over 1,400 agencies across the United States. All of them have different requirements. And so we make sure that there's liability in place. There's a legal contract in place. It's not just calling someone to ask if they're willing to take a student. There's a lot more involved with it, but there's a vetting process, right? And so we're really excited that we can help to partner with you to help you get placed. Can I do my placement at 2 different locations? Nope. You have to do one, and that's for part of that legal reason. So you can't try to do one and then say, oh, I really want to do half my time in another agency. You're not covered legally. Like there's no liability coverage for you and you don't want that. And so we need to make sure that you're in your one field placement as was contracted or understood when you did the field placement process. So you're going to do one placement at a time. What I will say is if you're in a large organization, sometimes there's opportunities to kind of shadow in other spaces with your field instructor's permission, and that's totally fine. So as long as your field instructor is supportive of that, we've had some students gain some additional experiences that way. Some additional ones are practicum placements paid, some. So we definitely have some with field stipends, and you're going to see that on the field application. It's noted on the application which field placements we believe offer field stipends. But what I'll say is with a little bit of an asterisk is when they first applied, they noted it, but as you know, nonprofits and agencies, their funding changes all the time. And so you absolutely can inquire about it if it's on the field application, but we can't guarantee that's still in place. So, look for it. That's great. Some students, that's really helpful and important. For other ones, it's not as much of a ranking for them, and that's okay. But I will say it's not the vast majority. It's generally a minority of the field agencies because we're working with agencies that are already under a lot of fiscal constraints. And so not everyone's able to offer a field stipend, but we still find that it's really meaningful work and it's really good experience and practice for you all. Can I have an evening and weekends only field placement? So just that's admit somebody, sorry. Evening and weekend placements are really limited. And when I say that, I'm not exaggerating. It's very difficult because if you think about the Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m., that is when most social service agencies are open. So we need to be available when the clients are there. I can't make up a field placement just based on your schedule. There's no one you're going to be able to see. And therefore, you're not going to be able to get the experience that you're going to need to fill out your online education agreement. I will say that we're happy to work with you. If there is, every effort will be made to find kind of an appropriate placement at an eligible field site if that exists. So I'm not opposed to taking some suggestions, but there's another slide later. We're not asking you to call these agencies. We're just asking you to let us know if there is something that you know is available. We're happy to explore it. Again, it takes all of that legal paperwork that's required, so it'll take a little bit of work, but we're open to kind of partnering with you and see. And again, please be prepared that the field placement's within normal business hours. I am working full-time. How will I fit my field placement in with my classes? So this is one other thing that I get a lot of, or I have lots of conversations with folks. We said at admission and we had you sign a piece of paper that really talks about this, is that because field is during normal business hours, I really, really discourage anyone from working full-time during this time. And, or if you're working full-time because you're in a part-time program, figuring out how you're going to flex that time during the work hours so that you can get your field placement in. Now is the time before you start applying. Now is the time to start thinking about, like, literally writing on I would say a piece of paper, how many hours of sleep you need, 7 to 8, right? How many hours do you have for travel? How many hours are you planning to work? how many hours do you need for dependent care? How many hours do you need for just general life, right? Activities of daily living. Because I will see some students who will try to work full-time, try to be in school full-time, and then add in 24 hours of field. And it's just not sustainable. And we want you to be able to take care of yourself. We want you to kind of help to manage a lot. We'll talk already in this program a lot about self-care, right? And burnout mitigation. And that's just really an unsustainable pace for our students. So start to think about that now. I'm only interested in a psychotherapy placement. What options do I have? So more and more our students are coming into our program saying, I only want one kind of field placement. And I use psychotherapy as an example, but that's not the only one. What I'll say is again, we're kind of limited by what's available at the time that you need a field placement. So if you think about the agencies that we have, they let us know, well, we're willing to take one student in the fall and one student in spring, summer. So if you happen to be a student that starts in the fall, you're not going to get that placement, right? And so we do that times over 1,000 for all of you in this program. And so I can't create a psychotherapy placement if it doesn't exist. The other thing that I'll say though, because so many students are coming in interested in psychotherapy, is students really don't graduate from our program ready to open up your own private practice independently, right? Like you can't do that. There's not only the business side of things, but also you have to have, in all states at this point that I'm aware of, additional clinical supervised hours by a fully licensed colleague. And so because of that, you know, if you're really interested in psychotherapy, you should be focused on, if you don't have a psychotherapy placement, what are placements that'll get you those transferable skills? Someone actually made the argument for me that case management actually was a really great MSW internship for psychotherapy because it broadens your understanding of kind of social determinants of health in general, right? And so when your clients are coming into you for therapy, you actually have a more broad understanding of what they've gone through, and that you can learn the psychotherapy modalities both in school in your classes, but also in like post-grad phase. So you can apply for a post-grad fellowship, you can apply for a job in which you're going to be supervised in that space. So I'm just trying to encourage you to expand your thinking about what field placement is and what transferable skills are. It'll still set you up for success. Okay. Yeah, the goal is to make sure you, is to ensure you obtain field hours that align with accreditation requirements. Okay. Field placement application process. So I'm going to give you some important dates. Again, this recording will be available for you and we'll post the slides, but these would be ones to write down for you. So applications for y'all starting in spring, summer are going to open January 20th. You will receive an email and it's going to be in your UMich email. So please make sure that you're checking your UMich email. We will not send it to any other email. So I've heard a couple students say, oh, I never got the email, but they were checking the wrong one. So just make sure you check your school email. You will have 2 weeks to complete and look through our field application. That should be plenty of time. We're going to have drop-in hours, which I'll show you in a second. So there will be opportunities for you to come speak to someone on our amazing field team and ask questions. Hey, I have the field application open. Do you know anything about this agency? Granny, if it's okay, maybe I'll take questions at the end. Can you just write down your question and then I'll make sure to answer it at the very end. Thanks so much. So you have 2 weeks to go through the application. It's due on January 31st. What I'm going to do is I'm going to follow up with, my office is going to follow up with everyone who did not apply. The absolute last, I'm not saying you have until February 2nd. What I'm saying is you have until January 31st until it closes. We will likely follow up with anyone who hasn't though, because you're jeopardizing your ability to get placed in spring, summer. That February 2nd is going to be the cutoff. If I have not heard from you, and you haven't placed your field application, you're going to get bumped to the following semester, which means you're going to have to delay graduation an entire semester and you're going to start field in the fall. So I just want to be really clear with everybody that you have to get your application in because we need enough time for you to go on all these interviews. And sometimes they don't work out on the first try, just like jobs. And so we need enough time for you to be able to land somewhere. So make sure that you write those dates down and make sure you check your email on January 20th because you'll get an email. Overall, the placing timeline is listed here. This is just another way to kind of depict what it is. I'm kind of a visual person, so I created this. But so on January 20th, look at your email. You're going to get an email with the application link there. And then January 20th through the 31st, we're going to have virtual placing office hours, and it's going to be every day. So you can hop in. You don't have to make an appointment. You can just drop into the Zoom and you can ask questions. I'm going to show you the schedule in the next slide. And then January 31st, make sure that you hit submit. So some people start the application and then they forget to hit submit. So make sure you hit submit. And then I just put a note in there that not completing your application on time will impact your progress through the program. By February 14th, you should have received notification from one of the placing field faculty. So what happens is if you rank, I'm gonna use something. If you rank Chipotle first, I know that's not a real field, right? But if you rank Chipotle first, whoever the field faculty is that's assigned to Chipotle, they will reach out to you and say, hey, I got your materials. Let's talk a little bit about your goal statement. If it kind of matches for that agency, okay, I'm going to send your materials on. So it's within 2 weeks that you need to kind of know that the first step is being taken. It doesn't mean that you get a placement in 2 weeks. It doesn't mean necessarily that you even have an interview date time. It means that you've heard from our office within 2 weeks, that you're like starting the motion, right? Because they actually go through all of your field resumes and they go through all your goal statements and review all those. So field faculty need a little bit of time to go through that. So in 2 weeks, you'll hear from one of us. You don't have to memorize this, but this is the every day, either at 1 o'clock Eastern or 9 o'clock Eastern. We rotate every day throughout 2 weeks. These are those drop-in hours that we're talking about. It's live on our website too. So that's the URL. And like I said, I'll send these slides out. It'll be on the website. They're all Eastern time. So I don't know if anyone's West Coast time. So just make sure that you note that. But we have all these dates and times to provide as much flexibility on our end to accommodate your schedules. So here's some drop-in hours for you. Then what you can start to be doing now is actually start to create your resumes if you haven't already. So make sure that you use your UMich email on your resume because that's where everything's going to be happening. So make sure you update your resume to have your UMich. But there's lots of links here around resume tips, writing assistance. We actually have a writing assistant here embedded in the school social work who can help you. So you're going to have both your resume updated and something called a goal statement, which I'll talk about next. But there's some different hyperlinks there that can help you prepare around submitting your field app and interviewing prep. Some people have had, I was a first gen student. So I'll say, my parents did not go to grad school. And so therefore they couldn't walk me through, well, hey, when you go to interview, make sure you remember these things, make sure. So we wanted to make sure and be as transparent and supportive as possible and put some of this information on the web for you all. Your goal statement. So have your goal statement ready. You should start writing this now. I will say also that that writing assistant, the school social work writing assistants right there, she's so nice. Like Betsy is so kind and she will take your writing sample and give you feedback. But I will say if you could please give her as much notice as possible. So if your field application, you're going to have to upload your resume and goal statement when you apply. And so it's unfair to her to try to ask her to have like a 24 to 48, even 72-hour turnaround because she has so many other students. So even now, if you have a draft of something, you can send it to her and that would give her some time, especially, in this space to give you some feedback and then you can tweak it from there. All right, composing and submitting your field application. So one thing that you're going to see on the field application when you open it up is, have you attended or watched the Introduction to Field Education webinar? So those of you on this call, you can click check. You have attended this, you're good. Some of your colleagues who are not on here, you're going to have to review this. So they're going to have to attest that they did that. We want you to review the incoming field students website. So that'll be hyperlinked there. As I said, prepare your goal statement there and prepare your resume. If you have all those things, you're going to proceed with the application. It's basically an online portal. If you want an employment-based placement, it is still the same application. There's actually a first question that says, are you interested in an employment-based placement? And if you say yes, it's going to take you to a different page. If you say no, it's going to take you to another. So just making sure that's kind of the first triage kind of decision point in the field application. You will rank your choices. So what you're going to see is a little box with descriptions of all the agencies who are willing to take a student for spring summer term. And so I don't know what that is. Sometimes I get questions on these calls. Well, can you just send me the list now? I cannot, because we are actively recruiting agencies to take y'all for spring summer. And so that list is not going to be accurate. So even if I were to download it now, it wouldn't be accurate by the time you see it. We make every effort to match you with kind of your ranked choices based on availability. But also just know we keep saying this is a dynamic process. So sometimes an agency said, yeah, we'll take 5 students in the spring summer term. And then we send 5 resumes or even 6 or 7 resumes over. And they say, oh, you know what, we're really sorry. We lost funding. Our field instructors left. I don't know, there was a flood. I don't know, right? There's different things that happen. And so they're not able to take those students. And I know it can be frustrating on the students' end, but we didn't know that, right? So we didn't know that when they said they would take students. So if that's the case, we will move down on your rank choice. So we'll go to your number 2. And then if number 2 doesn't work, we'll go to number 3. And if 3 doesn't work, we'll go back and see what's available and we'll send you more descriptions. We are proud to say we have always placed students. It's just a timing thing. We just have to work through. There's really no guarantee you're going to get your top 3. Right? Your top 3 gives us a window into what you're looking for as far as those transferable skills and what kind of agency. And you're going to rank things like, you know, what's more important to me? Location. I would rather be close to my house. Or what's really important to me is that the skills that they're going to offer. I'm willing to drive. We have some folks who are willing to drive pretty far, actually. And they're like, that's fine. I have the time. Transportation is not a problem. So we don't know what your priorities are either. So this kind of helps us figure that out. But I really do want to reiterate that there's no guarantee that the places that you rank are going to be available or that you're going to match in that space. So just be open, try to be open to that space. Okay. For non-employment based, so this is going to be the vast majority of y'all. So these are people who are not in a workspace that you want to apply for, but you want a different field placement. Like I said, you're going to be asked to rank your first and second and third. You're going to ask to be rank your priorities. Sorry, weekly schedule, setting, and practice opportunities first, and this will help. And then you're going to rank your top 3 choices of your agency. We recommend you be as open as possible and limit your filter selection. So when you first do a first pass of our field application online, don't choose too many filters because you might not be seeing some things. So I would say take a broad look at it first and then mess around with the filters is my recommendation. For those of you in the online program, probably more of the online program than residential, if you happen to not see any agencies within 60 miles of your residence, of kind of where you're coming from, there is a little button that says near the filter by location that allows you to note that in there, because as we expand across the United States, there's some of your colleagues who are not able to find anything. For those of you who do want an employment-based placement, so this is, I'd like to do my field at the place where I work. Here's the criteria. It's kind of a lot. So you will have to, your agency would have to be vetted to make sure that it aligns with the MSW competencies, and we can give you that form and that information. You're going to search for your employer first in our application. If you find it, awesome. That means they're already affiliated. That's going to save you a bunch of time. You're going to rank your employer, and we're going to move forward with the rest of the process. If they are not in our list, you're going to go to a form that's blank and you're going to enter in your employer's name and information. And then we'll kind of walk you through the process from there. To kind of qualify to be an employment-based placement, you really, again, have to be able to do master's level social work. You have to make sure, or the agency has to be willing to approve this for you. So we actually get the CEO and director's signature and buy-in addition to your work supervisor. And then in addition, you need to find a qualified field instructor. Sometimes a qualified field instructor can also be your supervisor, but oftentimes it's someone different. So oftentimes it's someone else in the agency who has a social work degree, and you'll be spending time in another part of the agency. And so that just requires buy-in and consent from everybody involved. We will walk you through this process. The first step, though, is just to do this application, and then we'll walk you through subsequent steps from there. Some placing considerations, I've said some of these things already, but we really just wanted to reiterate from the agency side. There's some factors that we don't know around field instructor agency availability that changes their training program cycle. So a lot of agencies will only take students, let's say in the fall. And so some people will come to me and say, well, I know that social work, the U of M school social work has a relationship to X, right? And I'll say we do, but they're not willing to take students in this semester. So that can be a factor. Of course, they might have changes in funding. And then previous experiences with students sometimes impacts things. So their ability to kind of take students on, or sometimes they want to take breaks, and that's okay. On the student side, your program schedule, or I will say even special scholarship programs, that sometimes can impact your placing, your availability, your interest in pathway also is a factor. So we have to make sure that your field placement maps to your pathway. So just keep that in mind. Your related professional experiences or volunteer experiences. And then we generally say professionalism. So people come in with different levels of understanding around professionalism. And so we just wanted to kind of note that everyone's on their own journey here. Yeah, Professor Dazzle, feel free to chime in.
Yeah, I just wanted to just pause for one moment, if that's okay,
Yeah.
Professor Kong, because there was a question in the chat and there was just a little bit of back and forth. So I thought it might be helpful if this was clarified
Okay.
as information is being processed. So a student, Caitlin, had said, I already applied and then completed my EBP application already for spring summer. Do I need to apply again in January? And I just noted that some online students who are not local to Southeast Michigan had to start this process earlier than the people that this meeting is intended for. But then there's still a little bit of other confusion on that. So I just wanted to maybe pause just for a moment, make sure everyone understands, based on who's on this call and what's being asked.
Yeah, sorry, I wasn't obviously looking at the chat, so thanks for pausing me. So if you have already worked with one of the online teams to apply for an EBP in the spring summer term, that means to me that you're probably further out, like you're a non-local student. And so if you've already started that process with Talia, Professor Adunbi, Professor Barry, or Dr. Robinson, like you've already submitted your employment-based application, you're already in that process, then you continue with that and you actually can hop off this call. And sorry for any confusion, but that's the beginning. This call is really for people who are residential on-campus students and for those of you who are in the online program who are about an hour from our campus. Does that help to clarify? I know some people hopped on after I said that earlier and then, okay. Hi. Thanks, Professor Denzel. All right. All right. So a couple things. Oh, Ariana, do you want to chime in
Yes,
while
just
we're paused?
yes, please. Just to make sure if I need to stay on the call or not. I submitted my application back in October. I've already been in contact with Professor Faye.
Mhm.
But I didn't have any of the timeline dates for like the February 14th being when I should have my first interview. Is that still applied to me as well, even though I started the process earlier?
No,
Or
because you're already started the process with them.
okay.
So you need to just follow what Professor Adumbi is like working with you to get you placed, because the idea is to get started sooner. So just follow that process. And actually, if you're already connected to Professor Adumbi, you're good. You don't have to necessarily stay on this. You're welcome to. Everyone's welcome to this party. But yeah, if you're already in that process, you actually don't have to follow this timeline.
Okay, thank you.
Of course. All right. All right, we're gonna keep going, but I'll take some more questions at the end. I'm gonna not record for the questions Q&A part, just so you all know at the end. All right, so for this last part, just at the bottom is gonna be my request, my sincere request. Oh, thanks, Professor Danswell. Good to see you. Is to please not to reach out to agencies directly. The reason being is we've curated a lot of relationships with communities over time, and we don't want, like, if you think about like 100 students who are starting field in spring summer, and there's a really popular agency and they get 50 calls. We're trying to maintain some of these relationships and trying to say like, hey, we're U of M, let's partner. Can you take 50 students? Great, if you can, but we don't want them bombarded. And again, we have kind of the spiel of how to even get onboarded here around the legal contracts and some of that stuff. So if you could just defer to us, we welcome though, like if you know of a nonprofit agency near you, and you're really interested in pursuing that, I would say sooner than later. The legal contracts take at least 8 weeks. And so you can't come at the beginning of spring summer semester when it starts. And I'm going to say the application is going to open up in a couple weeks. And then you say, hey, I have a great agency. That's not enough time. And I'm going to tell you, we don't have enough time to start that process. But I would say around now, actually, is if you have an agency that you really are interested in, or you have some different circumstance that you want to talk to me about, I'm open to connecting about that. Okay. All right. And then what happens after you apply? You submit the rankings, and you'll submit your application. After that, the field faculty review your rankings, and it kind of gets routed to your number one choice. That's the field faculty that you'll connect with. They're going to review your resume and your goal statement, and they're going to try to send off your materials to your first choice. And hopefully you get an interview offer. So what I'll also say is, let's say we send off 5 resume goal statements to the agency and they're only taking 2 spots. They may only offer interviews for 3 of you. So we'll send off all your materials, but we'll let you know what they say. If they offer you an interview, awesome, you'll proceed. If they do not offer you an interview, you'll move down to your second choice, and we'll just keep going that way. If you proceed with the interview and you get offered the placement, congratulations. And if you proceed with the interview and you don't get it, We'll ask them for some feedback just for your own professional development, and we'll relay that feedback to you. And you'll move on to your next option. We'll just keep going until you find a placement in that space. Some additional considerations. I get a lot of questions. What if I don't get an interview or I'm not accepted after I interview? It is okay, right? I said we're not guaranteeing that you're going to get your first 3, but we'll do our best. And so we'll make sure to work with you in this space to try to see what we can do to move you on in the process. So you'll have your second and third choices. If you don't get an interview, you'll be connected to the field faculty member, and so they'll walk you through what the next process is. One important thing also to share is, let's say your number 2 choice is a different agency, right? That agency is connected to a different field faculty member. They might do what we call a handoff over email and say, thank you so much, Erin Kong, for interviewing. I'm sorry that didn't work out, but we're going to move you on to your second one. And your second agency is connected to Professor so-and-so. And you're going to work with them because they know the agency and they're going to be able to answer your questions. So you might switch field faculty during this process. And so just be aware of that. Let's see, provide feedback. You may need to reflect on kind of where you are in your skill development and what placements might be good fits. So that's maybe after your interview, but I think some students have a perception of the type of agency they want, and then when they interview, that's not really a good fit. So we can kind of support you through that and talk you through that. Field faculty work as a team, so I just talked about that. And then if for whatever reason you're unsuccessful, or in some cases some students refuse interviews, and that's for different reasons, but I'll say our goal is to try to get this process going. We really need you to help partner with us and collaborate with us on moving through the process. If that happens, just know that there's going to be a pause in the process, and the student and the field faculty, myself, meet to kind of have a planning meeting. We call it a field success meeting. We're kind of like, hey, where are we right now? Like, why are we not moving through this process? What can we do to kind of help us all proceed in the right direction? So just know that that's kind of a process issue. Field placement proximity. So we consider, again, local options around 45 to 60 minutes from Ann Arbor. I would say the big cities are Detroit, Ann Arbor, and Ypsi, but that's not exclusive. Most students though travel about 30 to 60 minutes one way to their field placement. So just plan accordingly for that. You're responsible for your transportation. If for whatever reason you don't have transportation, please indicate this on your application, but just also know that's going to limit your options. So it's not because I don't want to give you something. It's really because I don't know what else is on a bus line unless you can carpool, or again, find a bus line that you can take. You're really going to be super limited. So you might have to take a field placement that is not something you were initially thinking about, but that's what's in close proximity that you can get your hours in. We're almost done. Thanks for hanging in there. Disability accommodations. We just want to note here, we got some feedback from students early on that it would have been helpful to know this at this point, actually, in the process is, many students have accommodations, and whether it's a formal accommodation or not, we really want to work with you to support you in field, and class accommodations don't always translate to field, as you can imagine. So, some people's accommodations might be extra time taking tests. Well, that certainly is not necessarily going to translate to field. And so we're here to help support you. Professor Dadswell is actually one of our field education leads in the disability space. That is her clinical background. And she works a lot with the services for students with disabilities. Their information is listed here as well. They have lots of ideas and have worked with our students for a long time. And so again, it's not a mandate. You don't have to have a formal accommodation letter. But if you do want that support, we wanted to mention it here now so that you can connect with the Office of Students with Disabilities now. Here's some important information and resources for any students who are international students. Make sure you read all the information that you need about curricular practice training and the letters that you need. There's some additional kind of, like I said, resources and links here and information for you. Once you are placed, as you kind of, let's say, congratulations, you're placed. That's very exciting. What can you do to prepare? There's a article that we linked here around Are You a Joy? There's also the Preparing to Start website for fields that you can check out. Maybe ask your field site if there's any prerequisite things that they need to do, or that you need to do, sorry, around health screenings, drug testing, or background checks. Some require that and some don't. And we try to put that on the field application if we know it ahead of time. So there's actually some heads up, and we have a little attestation just so that you know this field requirement, our field site has these requirements. And so we try to put that on the field application for you. Look out for an email about your orientation to field once you start. So in spring, summer term, you're going to have something then called a pre-field orientation. That's going to walk through all the assignments that you need for field. So just look out for that. A few pieces of advice, if you'll allow me. Please be patient with all the things and all the processes. Kind of own your own learning and manage expectations. I will say often I learn just as much from what hasn't gone well or what I was frustrated with in jobs as what does go well. And I remember being asked to go back and see my same patient 3 times because I kept forgetting to ask the right questions. And my field instructor kept sending me back in and I was a little mortified, but the patient was very nice. And so you do learn from your mistakes. And so just kind of lean into that. I think you'll have a much better experience in my experience. Learn to function with that discomfort, anxiety, and ambiguity. We're in a messy field. It's not always tied up in a bow and it's not always perfect. And we have some really complicated dynamic cases with our clients and our projects. And so just trying to figure out how to navigate that for yourselves. Be willing to make those mistakes and learn from them. And then seek, and use feedback. We often ask students, who learns through feedback, who wants supportive feedback, and everybody raises their hand. And then when we go to give the feedback, it's not always perceived as well as graciously. And so just be mindful of how you kind of give and receive feedback in that space. Some final thoughts, don't hesitate to reach out to us as needed. Anything that you need, your field faculty will be here to answer your questions. The main field office email will be listed there. Friendly reminder, your field placement ensures you obtain the necessary experiential practicum hours, right, around accreditation. It's not necessarily your first job. Barring extenuating circumstances, again, we encourage you to remain in your one field placement because it's quite disruptive. The field office is always available, and I want to hear the good things. I want you to come to me if you have any questions about the process or any certainly hopefully minor hiccups in the process. But we also want to hear the cool things. So I bump up some of these stories up to our marketing director and to the dean. Just sometimes students have such amazing impact in our communities, and we just really, really like to hear about it. So if you have any of those things, please let your field faculty know or come see me. I know if you're kind of far out, it might be hard, but if you're ever on campus, and for those of you who are on campus, I have an open door policy. As long as I'm not in a meeting, please come see me. So I have a mini fridge and some candy sitting on my desk. So if you ever need a snack, come say hi. This is the last chunk. And then I promise I'm gonna unshare and hit the stop recording so we can do Q&A. Some people want to do the school social work specialization and certification, and maybe you heard this at orientation, but I just mentioned it here because it has a field component. So you have to take these required classes for the specialization, but you also need 500 field hours of direct service with children and youth. And so it's pretty wide and accepting on what that means. It's really anything related to direct service with children and youth. But there are some of you in certain pathways that may or may not be easy to do in your certain field placement, depending on your pathway and depending on the field agency that you get. And so just take a look at this information. There's the approval process that's listed here, and I'm going to give you context at the end of this. But just also know that each state has kind of specific requirements. So if you move out of state, what we're giving you as the school social worker specialization, you may need to take that certificate and do some additional stuff. So just do your homework in that space. Here's some hyperlinks for you that I'll share that'll be online as well. So that'll be available to you. And then this slide are the 3 folks who are your best resources. So if you want to be more in the weeds, I gave you a very quick peripheral kind of overview of that, but these really are your subject matter experts. If you have any questions, Professor Peterson and Professor Boosie are in my office, in the field office. And between the 2 of them, they have a ton of school social work experience. And so they can answer your questions. Professor Sherman is also, as it says, a clinical professor here, but is really the lead in this specialization and helps with the letters, the verification, and those kind of things. So any one of them can actually help you through this process. And then this is my thank you slide. This is my thank you so much for coming. And here's my email. Here's the field office email, at least, and our main number. Let me stop sharing for a second. I'm going to stop recording. So thanks everybody if you're watching this online.